Hi, this is Rock. I'm making this video so I can rave once again about how wonderful Autofilter is. Let's take a look using the same sheet that we used for the sort unique. I've got my autofilter set. Here's a couple of pointers about setting an autofilter. Let me take it off here for a second. Okay, so we have no autofilter right now. I always leave a few rows between the column headers and where I'm going to have my filterable data. I've got 3 here. That's probably perfect, or at least it's the minimum, because as I've shown in other videos, one of the things I like to do is use the aggregate function to do something like a sum, and I'll show you here. So aggregate, and if I do a sum of these acres here, so I'll use 9, and then I'll say ignore nothing, which is 4, and then I'm going to choose my array here, which is all those acres, and I'm going to hit enter. I'm going to reset my freeze panes there so that as I scroll down, I can still see my column headers here. Okay, so now I've got this. I'm going to take these numbers and format them to be just like that. It's a little more readable. And then if I take this aggregate, the one has a 4 in it, and if I change this one to a 5, as I've shown you in another video, this 5 means that I'm going to ignore hidden rows. So when I have an auto filter set here for my data, I'll go ahead and go it from. When I have a filter set for my data, it's got the total of these numbers of acres. This one is the total of all of them, whether they're hidden or not. This one is the total of all the non-hidden rows. So that means that if I go ahead and do a filter where I say, show me the ones that were established before the 1900s, and then just select the ones that were established before the 1900s. If I say OK, then we have 3.6 million acres established before 1900. So this 3.6 million is the total once you have hidden all the other rows, and the 52 is still the total of all the acreage together. So that's one thing to re-emphasize with autofilter. Leave a few rows, one for the filter itself, one for the totals of everything, and then this one for the totals, which is the filtered total. All right, you saw me set this filter, and I was very specific about how and why I did it. I'm going to take the filter off. If you'll notice, my data set here has this many rows in it. Let's say we've got 67 rows here. If I'm going to set my filter, notice that this data over here is a summary of the data that I've got on the right. It doesn't have 67 rows. So including it with all of the set of filtered data is actually misleading. So if I set my filter that way, it looks like if I filtered for Maine, for example, that this data over here has something to do with this row. It doesn't. It doesn't have anything to do with this row. So I'm going to clear that, and when I set a filter, I only select the cells. I'm going to take that filter off. I only select the cells above the data that has the same number of rows here. So if I set this filter here, now when I look at this, it goes all the way through Zion National Park down at the bottom. Where you set this filter is very important, and how you set it is important. It'll give you different data based on where you set that. So like, for example, if I came over here and I selected the whole row and I hit filter, and then I say, let's filter for the location being Maine, like I did before. What is happening? I was able to filter for this row of Maine, but then I've got all these other rows that are not Maine. So why are they still here if I tried to filter them out? What happened was, when you set an auto filter, it uses the leftmost column that has data as the guide for how many rows there are. So it used this column C when I set it by selecting the whole row. It used the leftmost column with data in it. And if you look, column C only goes down to row 40. So if I had changed this Hawaii to Maine, and then I came in here and I set this to Maine, it would also include row 40, which should be Hawaii, but that's where it stops. It doesn't filter beyond that because the filter that I set is driven by how many rows are in the leftmost column. So that's why it's very important where you set your filter. I'm going to clear this again and go down to row 40 and change this back to Hawaii. So when you set your auto filter, make sure you're selecting it above the data and using the column on the left that has all the rows of data. You see, I have some data here in this row column, but if I selected this, look what happens. If I set this and then I go to filter, that worked because it's contiguous with the rest of the data, so it was able to see that there's actually 75 rows of data. But because there are these blank columns, it was not able to sense when it set that auto filter that the total number of rows should be up through row 75, and it ended at row 40. So be careful when you're setting your data. I usually make sure that I've got one full data set that I can go ahead and click the whole row and set it. That's usually how I do it. Let's look at the auto filter. Notice when you do the drop down, the options it gives you, it starts with the select all button. Very easy to deselect that to give you a way to select just a few. If you have just a few to select, instead of going through and deselecting all of these and just leaving the ones you want, it's much faster to use the select all to deselect all and then go choose the ones that you want. You can also enter a search term like white here, and we've got a white lighthouse and white sand beach. So it'll bring back all the options that match this text that you put in there. If you go down here, there's blanks. So you can take out blanks. In this column, I'm looking at the description of the images that are included with the data on the Wikipedia page. If I say OK after I deselect the blanks, it'll just show me those line items that have pictures. Clearing from this particular column, I can do it by clicking the drop down and then clicking clear. When I have selected something, you'll notice that this has a little filter and a drop down in addition to just having the drop down. If I come over here and I just want to see Alaska and then I choose this, you'll see these both have filters on them. One thing to be very careful of when you're using autofilter is that you might think you're clearing everything when you clear this, but it's just clearing it from column J. So you still have filtered columns here. As you can tell by looking at this, the difference between those, and also, and especially, that on the left, when you filter, rows take on this blue color. And you can also see which rows are hidden by having the double line between the row numbers of the row headers. So if you want to get back to a place where you have everything cleared, I'm going to go in here and deselect that one. So now I have 3 filters set. The fastest way to clear everything is to click this clear filter. If I do this, that gets me back to where I still have the filters, but they're cleared. So coming back again here for a second, let me redo that where I have the blanks selected, I have Alaska selected, and I have this one deselected. If instead I had turned off this filter, then I would have to reset this filter again to get back to where I was. So use the clear icon to clear out when you want to clear multiple filters. And once you do, you can check over here on the left and these row headers are no longer blue, they're this white color. So that's how you know the filter is cleared. When I click this down arrow, you see it says sort A to Z. Personally, I don't sort this way. Sort by color. You can have a custom sort if you've got different colors in here. You can filter by color if you've got colors in here. So let me do this. I'm going to say, let's look at all the ones that are in the South. I guess you could call Arkansas the South. You've got Florida, Kentucky, South Carolina, Tennessee. Texas is really on that border between the South and the Southwest. It's sort of its own thing. So we've got North Carolina. There we go. So if I select for the South here and I make these guys a color, and then I select for ones in the West, that, let's say Montana, Idaho, Washington, Wyoming, Utah. Oh, I missed Virginia when I did the South. Let's say that. And then if I color these, so you can filter by color here. You can filter by the other one. You can also filter by no fill, and these are the rest, where I can find my Virginia and give it its Southern classification. There we go. So with text, we've got all kinds of things where we can say contains North, for example. And notice when I did that, it didn't filter just for North with green. It didn't combine the color and the text filter. If I came back in and filtered it by the color, notice that now it's not filtering by North. So those are mutually exclusive. You can either do color or you can do the text filter, not both. I'm going to clear that. Let's look at these dates, because as you saw, as I was looking at these dates and filtering them before, I really like how Microsoft Excel does these filters in the dates. When you see places where there are multiples, like in 1980, there were multiple national parks established in 1980. And this gives you a way to very specifically choose which ones you're talking about. So you can get very specific with date selections. Notice how when I select, it's fully selected if all of them are selected. If it's partially selected, it's got this black filled in there. And also notice that if you're working with dates in filters, Microsoft Excel doesn't automatically recognize dates that are before January 1st, 1900, which means that it's going to put these just as text. We can still filter by them, but only as text, instead of the automated way these are treated and grouped by date. There's also a wider range of date filters you can use here. Tomorrow, next week, next month, this quarter, etc. And you can even customize a filter for that, where it's after or equal to, and then you can choose from among the dates you already have, and before or equal to, and then you can choose from among the ones that make sense. And there you go. So I really like the way that Autofilter works for the Microsoft dates. Another thing I want to point out with Autofilter, you'll see that these names came in order. But if I sorted this by location, like Alaska, etc., then when I come over here, they're not in alphabetical order. But if I click on this, this is a fast way to see my list in alphabetical order. So I can ask the question, is Yosemite in the list? Yes, I can see it here very quickly. Instead of needing to look at the whole thing, I can just go straight to where I expect to see it alphabetically and see whether or not it's in here. Interestingly, with the longitude and latitude, I've got latitude on the left, so that's south and north here, and you can see that this one is in the southern hemisphere, so this must be the one that's in American Samoa, and it is. It's the only one that's not in the northern hemisphere. But if you look at these latitudes, they are in numeric order, which is very helpful. So you can say to yourself, what is the northernmost national park in the US? And you can choose this and get to it, Gates of the Arctic in Alaska. And that's some helpful tips about how to use an autofilter. Next, we'll be looking at some product with filter and some things you can do with that. See you then.